Chris Street all the time, it sounds like now. That announcement by Bernardino comes on the heels of a media tour of the Treasurer's office and a media conference by Street himself. With more on the saga of Chris Street, political correspondent Peggy Lowe joins us from the Register building in Santa Ana. How are you, Peggy?
Hey, Peggy.
Hi, guys. I'm doing well, thanks. But yeah, I do kind of feel like all Chris Street all the time.
Now, the union worked to defeat Street in the first place. What impact does that have on what they're doing?
You know, Nick Bernardino, the union boss who you just saw in that tape, says there's absolutely no politics here. He said that's not come into play, and what also doesn't come into play, according to Nick, is the fact that Chris Street has been highly critical of public pensions. So what Nick is saying is he wants this nonpartisan effort to really go after this recall. Clearly, though, this is the first bomb that's being thrown out there. He has no organization. He hasn't suggested he will even put aside any money yet. And he got a pretty tepid response. The Republicans are saying, we're going to wait and see what the Supes do about this. And the Democrats say, we're always going to support Nick, but we're not quite there yet.
And according to the press conference that he held and the stories that we've been reading that you have had in the Orange County Register, Chris Street is saying that his problems are about style, not substance. Explain a little more on that.
That's exactly right, Ann. That's a quote from his press conference on Monday. That press conference was rather amazing, and again, quite a show of style on Street's part. We were all ushered in, and he took us on a tour of his newly remodeled office. Of course, we've reported here at the Register that his remodel has cost about $1 million, and it's quite extensive. So he took reporters on the tour of this remodeled office and talked about the new efficiencies, and he's saying what a better job he's even doing than John Morlock had done before him. Then he did finally answer reporters' questions, and he was hit pretty hard. Now, his handlers have him on a very tight leash. His lawyer was whispering in his ear, his PR man was there, and he had a group of 10 county workers in a nearby conference room creating a book that was 3 inches high of his response to all the allegations that are out there. Frank Mickadite, one of our columnists, weighed it. It weighed 7.8 pounds.
Wow. And again, I asked you this on a prior occasion, kind of curious what people have had to say about it now. How has this affected his work?
I don't know that I can say for certain how it's affected his work, in that I'm not in the office. However, I will say this. He isn't in the office sometimes because he's holed up with his lawyers. For instance, all last Friday, he was holed up with Phil Greer, his attorney. Monday was completely taken up with this press conference. He is inundated with reporter calls, media calls. I had to call him yesterday after Nick's appeal for this recall. By the way, what he is saying is, I'm not going to resign. I'm going to stay the course. And even though John Morlock, who was his only and close supporter, called for his resignation, Street's staying put.
Now, the next Board of Supervisors meeting is going to be on September the 11th.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's
and
right.
That's when Morlock has said he's going to ask the rest of the board to strip Street of his power. Is that still going to happen?
That's still very much on the agenda. Now, the Supes are on holiday these couple of weeks, but Morlock believes he does have the votes to do that because there are so many issues and there are so many things they've been batting around. And it's kind of like we talked about last week, Ann, when you were saying, is there enough to really strip this guy of these powers? Should we be so concerned? Well, because of the 1994 bankruptcy, this ghost is hanging over this county, and perception is a lot of this. And people who have all this money in this portfolio get nervous. So Morlock still feels very strongly about that. They have not backed off this call for resignation, and he'll move forward on September 11th.
It's my understanding that the portfolio is doing quite well. What do you get from that?
Yes, from what I understand, it's doing quite well. John Morlock says he watches it every day and runs his little spreadsheets, and he calls it my baby. And from all reports, it's doing fine. Now, there are a lot of safeguards in place that were put there exactly because of that 1994 bankruptcy. I talked to David Sundstrom, the auditor, and he said, you know, there's a lot of committees that are watching this and looking over the shoulder of whomever is treasurer, not just Chris Street. There's a lot of safeguards in place. And I actually think, I was talking to somebody about this today and looking at the overall picture of this Street phenomenon that's been going on the last couple weeks. The process is in place. It's caught some of these questionable things like a contract and some other things like, say, the remodel. The media's on it. You know, the process is working, and so everybody's just watching.
Yeah. Peggy, we thank you so much. Have a good weekend. Hope to see you next week.
Thanks, guys. You will.
All right. Thanks, Peggy.